Morning, everybody. Scott here. We're having another one of our fireside chats here beside the old electric fireplace. Today I've got Mark Capes, owner of Statewide Insurance, in here to answer a few questions and talk about some issues that you guys may run into. Mark, good morning.
Good morning.
First thing we're going to look at is buying homes in a flood zone.
Great questions.
What does that entail for the buyer?
Well, there are two different types of flood zones. There are preferred flood zones and standard flood zones. The preferred flood zones are the B, C, and X.
Okay.
So those are the ones that are less likely to flood.
Right.
That being said, about 30% of all flood claims come from those flood zones though.
Does it affect the difference in the premium price?
The National Flood Insurance Program gives you a preferred rate
Okay.
in the B, C, and X zones. So usually $250,000 coverage would run about $500 a year.
That's not
So
bad.
not bad.
Mhm.
The max, by the way, that the NFIP offers is $250,000.
Okay.
So if you got a $500,000 house, they're only going to give you $250,000. You can purchase additional excess flood insurance coverage at a reduced rate too, since you're in a preferred zone.
And what is the limit on that?
They'll go up to $10 million if you need it.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're going to pay for it.
Oh yeah. A lot of those are written through like Lloyd's of London, Zurich, some of the more international carriers.
Mhm.
So the rates are pretty decent, but because you're in that preferred area, they're not too bad.
Great. What about A and AE?
Those are the standard flood zones, and the rates are a little more there. So there's two ways to get around that. If you get an elevation certificate,
Mm-hmm.
the elevation certificate will show you what the base flood elevation is for that area.
Right.
If your house is higher than the base flood elevation for that area, they give you a little bit of a break on your premium there too.
Okay.
If it's at or below the base flood elevation for that area, it's going to cost you more money.
What are the rates averaging?
If you're at or below the base flood elevation, you could be looking at thousands of dollars a year. If you're 2 feet above the base flood elevation, so this is to the bottom of, or I'm sorry, the top of the slab,
Okay.
the top of the first floor. If it's 2 feet above the base flood elevation, you can get away with $400, $500, $600 a year.
That's
So
great.
not bad.
It's not as bad as I thought.
Yeah.
How about sinkhole coverage?
Sinkhole was a big issue for Pasco and Hernando counties, probably 10 15 years ago. So what happened was the insurance policy always covered sinkhole.
Okay.
And then there was a time there where it was taken advantage of. People were potentially filing sinkhole claims because they had a crack in their driveway or because their mailbox was leaning to one side. So there were a lot of claims filed,
Right.
which drove the price of the insurance policy way up. And some people couldn't even afford to stay in their house because they couldn't afford the house insurance.
Right.
So the carriers wound up stripping that sinkhole coverage away.
Okay.
Now cracks are just cosmetic,
Okay.
and they cover what's called catastrophic ground collapse.
And that's a total loss of the home?
The trigger is it has to be condemned by a local building official in order for that coverage to take effect.
Okay.
So as long as the home is condemned by a local building official, you still have coverage under the current homeowner's insurance policy. But any of the cracks are cosmetic. You can still buy sinkhole coverage, but you have to pass an inspection, pass underwriting, and then they give you a 10% deductible. So Is
Now,
it
what-
worth it?
What about the, like the houses, say somebody buys a sinkhole house that's not repaired, what does it take to bring that to an insurable place?
That happened a lot. People would file a claim, get paid out, not make the repairs. So basically, if there were no repairs made, they're pretty uninsurable unless you go to like a Lloyd's of London market and really show them, you know, detailed photographs, detailed inspection reports, and then you may be able to get them to write it with, you know, no sinkhole coverage on their course, and the rates are going to be pretty costly. The standard courses, if it was repaired,
Right.
you know, carriers will still take a look at those. Citizens in particular is the main one looking at those. And we send them the engineering report, they take a look at it, make sure that all the I's were dotted and all the T's were
Pins are where they're
crossed.
supposed to be.
Yeah, and as long as they did that, citizens will write them and the premiums aren't bad,
Okay.
regular rates.
4-point inspections for insurance.
So, last year there were a lot of Hurricane Irma claims that were filed,
Right.
mainly due to roof damages and roof inspections, where several years later, it was determined that people all of a sudden had Hurricane Irma damage. So the carriers have tightened their guidelines on the 4-point inspections. They want a 4-point inspection typically for any home that's over 30 years old.
Right.
There are a couple of carriers left that will give you up to 40 years before they require the 4-point inspection. But typically 30 years is the cutoff point. They want a 4-point inspection. That's going to be for your roof, plumbing, electric, and AC. And they don't have to be brand new, they just have to be in good
Working
working
condition.
order.
Is there like does it have to be how much of its life left, or is there a date where they won't do it if it's older than that?
The roof specifically, some of the carriers are looking at water heaters now.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see those listed on the 4-point inspection, but the roof specifically has to have at least 3 years of life left.
Okay.
If it's less than 3 years, it's either ineligible for the private market, or again, you could go to like a Lloyd's of London, pay a little bit more money and still get it insured, as long as there's no leaks.
Okay. How about AC? Is there, you know, how old? Will they let it be 12 years old, 20 years old?
Yeah, they're typically not real strict on AC units. There are a couple of carriers that are just getting pickier and pickier.
Mm-hmm.
So if a particular point in that 4-point inspection is beyond their comfort zone, they can deem it ineligible.
Okay.
But the AC, as long as it's working,
Yeah.
typically isn't a deal breaker.
And what is a roof certification?
The roof cert is basically if a home is over 25 years, the roof certification is required.
Does that come from a roofer, or where do you get that?
A roofer, general contractor, engineers, but you don't see too many of those on the roofs. But the roof certification just basically gives you the condition of the roof and how much life it has left.
Okay.
So not quite as extensive as the 4-point inspection, but still gives the carrier the information that they need on the roof.
Nice. And is there anything you'd like to add? Any information that we should have about your industry?
Well,
What to expect?
just recently this year, because of the claims that were filed last year, and I actually read an email a day or two ago where they paid out over $30 billion in insurance claims. Most of those were catastrophic hurricane claims. So we did see a huge spike in homeowners premiums this year.
Right.
It's likely that we'll see not maybe as bad as this year, but another spike again next year to make up for some of those losses. That's just how the insurance industry works. They look at how much they pay out at the end of the year. If they need to bump up their premiums to make up for it the following year, that's what they do. So there's a possibility that we could see that again next year.
Especially if we have storms this year.
Yeah, knock on wood. Hopefully we'll have a quiet season this year. But different carriers also took on different underwriting guidelines. So there are some carriers now that will not write your insurance if your house is less than 5 years old.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, if
More
your
than
roof is
your roof.
if your roof is more than 5 years old. Some carriers 10 years old.
Okay.
And then we're starting to see some carriers. So really something that you need to be cautious about is if your roof is damaged or has a claim, they're depreciating the value of that roof.
Right.
So there's still a lot of companies that are doing full replacement value on your roof claim.
Mm-hmm.
But some, if it's near the end of its life, could wind up giving you $0 on that roof claim. So just be sure that when you're looking at the insurance policy, you've got a good grasp on, how it's going to cover you as far as the roof is concerned. Make sure that it's eligible for that particular carrier, because we do get those calls a lot. One company quoted me this much, another company quoted me that much, and in reality, they weren't eligible for that company. So you can run those quotes, but getting the policy issued is a little more difficult task today.
Okay. One question that just popped into my head, and I know we've had this discussion before, insuring contents.
Yeah.
I know in my case, the contents that what they insured me for initially was a lot greater than what I had in contents.
Yeah.
That's something that people really need to look at when they get their new policies.
Well, and we get that question a lot. So basically what the carrier does is if they insure a house for $200,000, they're typically going to give you 50% of that or $100,000 to cover all your contents inside. Some carriers give you 70 or 75% of whatever you insure the house for to insure the contents inside. And it's pretty much set in stone. If you buy a policy from that company, that's what you get.
Okay.
There are some companies that'll let you lower that coverage specifically though. So it all depends on the company.
Right.
But if you look at your insurance policy, you'll see typically the dwelling is insured for $200,000. The other structures that are not attached to the dwelling, they're insured for $20,000 or 10%
Okay.
of the dwelling amount. The contents are 50% of the dwelling amount. And your loss of use, if you get put out of the house because of a claim, is usually 10% of whatever you're insuring the house for.
Okay.
$20,000.
It's great information this morning. I appreciate you coming by.
Absolutely. Thanks for the coffee.
Anytime. And if you have any questions about insurance, please call Mark, 352-523-0800. Statewide Insurance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dade City Realty is located at 12206 US Highway 301 in Dade City, Florida. Call our office today at 352-567-5606 or visit us on the web at dadecityrealty.com.